Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you touched on about like values and direction. And that's one thing that I find a lot of people in the space like to disregard because it's the technology is God, and if the technology is sound, nothing else matters.
Hmm.
And yet it's a system that's highly usage dependent. And because anyone can participate, whoever participates has something to do with the way it shakes out. And so, for example, I back, of course, in the toxic maximalism days, which they're still around a little bit. They're
They're still
definitely
around, but they
the
got their feathers trimmed. They got their wings clipped yesterday. The store of value narrative is out the door. Uncorrelated store of value gone. No one can say that with a straight face anymore. They'll just get laughed at.
yeah, and it's funny. It's funny how again, possibly drawn way on conversations of ours years prior. I do get the less feeling of like an agenda-driven social attack going on. It's kind of more, it's settled, it's over. There's less of
Mhm.
that going on. But when I do look at projects for a while, so I have a amount of friends who are participating in the Bitcoin as VS ecosystem, and there's some interesting projects that have been developed on that chain. And at the same time, I can't get myself to get excited about the project. I mean, for one thing, of course, all the technical issues of just this seems just like Bitcoin with bigger blocks, and that's it. And that needs to evolve eventually after
Mhm.
a couple decades maybe. But also just the culture, the attitude, which
Mhm.
is something that doesn't actually affect the technology, yet it does.
Yeah, it does
And
very
so
much.
if you're driving towards a goal, um, was it as the great Yogi Berra once said, be careful where you're going because if you don't know, you might not get there.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where that's kind of one reason why I'm paying attention to things that, for example, like what the work AVALabs is doing, because I think it seems to be a right-headed approach to evolving the system without just saying what new thing can I come up with, what new tangle of a technology, again, iota zing in there, can I come up with that's just going to break, but who cares because I've already printed millions of tokens
Yeah.
and I've made money off of them.
Right. Right. So let me tell you a little bit about our vision going forward. I think you probably have a good grasp of it, but the listeners might not. So our goal at Ava Labs with the Ava system is not to be a competitor to Bitcoin. Okay. So Bitcoin is trying to compete with the US dollar. That's a very,
Mhm.
very tall order. And they had been using the store of value narrative for doing so. They had been going around telling a whole bunch of fund managers that this is an uncorrelated asset and this and that. And, good power to them. I actually wish them the best. So that's a very hard fight to fight. And that whole payment space is a very hard space to be in my opinion. Now, Bitcoin Cash is working really, really hard to get mass adoption, far more than the Bitcoin folks, right? They're doing a whole lot of experiments. There's a town in Australia that is incentivizing Bitcoin Cash use and so forth. That's also wonderful. And I do believe that Ava gives you the raw tools to build a payment system that's far better than anything we have. But we're not pushing it for payments. Okay. So I think that people will always want their payments to be denominated in where they make their money. If I'm getting paid in dollars, I want to know how much I'm paying in dollars. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be stable coins that are going to be used for payments. So, but that's just my own opinion. What we're trying to do with Ava is build an asset issuance platform. Digital assets are where it's at. So I
Mhm.
want every single stock certificate to be on Ava as an Ava native token. I want every single bond, every single corporate debt instrument. I want every single piece of gold, and I want every single precious stone, not to mention every single commodity that's already traded, as well as every other commodity that is currently not traded to be a token. That's where the value is. There is a call for it. How do we know there's a call for it? Because we already saw that there was an immense hunger for these things during the ICO bubble. People were coming up with terrible, terrible schemes. They were mostly bilking the investors. I agree with that. Most of them were crap. Not the, probably 99.9% were crap. But there is a way to do this in a way that doesn't violate securities laws, and there's a way to do it that doesn't run counter to our laws and regulations and so forth. So here's another thing that happens. If you go down this path of, okay, I'm going to build my own payment system, and all right, it's going to be decentralized. Okay, so that's fine. Then where do you find yourself? The next decision that most techies have to make, and they don't make this explicitly, it just happens for them. They say, well, okay, here's my virtual machine. What's your virtual machine? Well, it's the Bitcoin virtual machine. The only set of rules you can enforce is what is capable of being enforced through the Bitcoin script mechanism. And what set of rules is that? It's a bunch of transfers. It knows no law. It obeys no restriction. So this is both a plus for people who are libertarian minded, but also it means that this is something that does not exist within our legal framework. What is the law that Bitcoin abides by? It's nothing. So if you want to be a true Bitcoin maximalist, then you have to eat meat. You have to hang out with people who are like Cypherpunk or whatever, people who are somewhat not all that bright seeming, I would say. And, people who are like just essentially very aggressive and just repeat talking points. I don't necessarily want, I don't want to talk about my family, but if I had a kid, I wouldn't want my kid hanging out with people like that. It's just toxic. It's just negative. And what do they have to offer the world, right? But most of all, what they have to say is screw the laws, screw the state, screw everything. We're going to come up with our own laws. And somehow, of course, those laws, first and foremost, enrich them. That's really the Bitcoin value system. And it's something that it doesn't.
Yeah, the current Bitcoin value system, I would argue it's kind of morphed over time.
It's morphed over time. It wasn't like this when I got in. It was not at all like this. It was very, very different. I think there was a takeover by what I would call riffraff of the Bitcoin ecosystem. And sadly, the core folks, the smarter folks in that ecosystem did not rein in the extreme elements. So now we have this terrible, I face a lot of students, right, at Cornell as a professor. And, and sometimes I used to give them, I would give them projects involving Bitcoin. They would work on it for a while, like a day or two. And then they'd come back and say, I don't think it's a good idea to be working on this stuff. It's just off-putting to normal people. So flipping this, the thing that I want to focus on is this inherent drive for people to have to reject the law. You find yourself having to say, I'm a cypherpunk, down with the state. And the person who's saying this, trying to say this most loudly, is a tool who comes out of board meetings, has raised a lot of venture capital, right? So you know who I have in mind. And this is like is going to board meetings on the one hand, and trying to sign agreements and NDAs and various different, God knows how many contracts. And then he steps out and says, I'm a cypherpunk. No, you're not a cypherpunk, Adam Back. You're nothing but, right? He's far from it. So
yeah, it's a fantastic cultural sort of movement to observe because I think there's a certain fashionability to being something like that, and it's cool. And that's one thing that I believe that the crypto space kind of leaned into is in absence of actual delivery of things that are useful for the world. You deliver something that's very culturally significant and people want to buy into. And that's one thing I've noticed about that seems to have transmitted off into the SV community is there's a high social degree of that. And so, for example, I use Twitch, the BSV run Twitter thingy, and I just poke around in there, see what's that. And obviously the economics of the system are a completely different discussion, but I do notice that there's a lot of self-congratulatory memes, and there's a lot of not logical arguments of use this, your data is secure, whatever. Again, use this. It's going to be more efficient. It's like not a lot of that. Just that join us. You'll join us one day anyway. This is where all the cool kids are. If you don't want to join, who cares? We don't like you anyway. kind of a very social construct. And
Right.
so it's been interesting to see how the store of value thing has been like a store of belief, of
Yeah.
faith. And it's been
Yeah.
like, it's, if you value that stuff, you're buying in. And if you buy into the mentality, you buy in with your fiat.
Yeah, you buy in with your fiat, you buy into a system that's 11 years old. Some people have already cornered the market in coins. They can manipulate it at will. And the chances that you're going to stack sats, stack Satoshis, and get rich through your Satoshis is pretty small. There are so many people ahead of you that that's just not a winning proposition. And we saw this in the markets. These people have been told to buy the dips, every dip since 16.5 thousand. Adam Back has said buy the dip, for a long time on that decline. So there are a lot of people out there who came to crypto, who bought into BTC, who stacked Satoshis, who lost a hell of a lot of money and then left the system. Those people are not going to come back. They were the early adopters, and we turned them off. And if you think about the price of a coin that is leaking 5 billion per year to power companies, well, where is that price going to go? It can only go down. So the natural tendency for that price is a downward slope, unless there's more money coming in. Well, there is more money coming into Bitcoin. Why? Because we all worked really hard to wave the Bitcoin flag. I was there in the early days. I've briefed more politicos than most other people, except maybe the nice folks at Coin Center down in DC. So, I talked to a whole lot of people. I went to the National Academy of Science, tried to make crypto and Bitcoin a legitimate research topic. So we did all this, and the people who came in late, the Cypherpunk of the world, the Bitcoin maxis of the world, they are the ones who are essentially trying to profit off of that goodwill that we all built while producing nothing of value. But let me take the conversation in a positive direction. Let me tell the viewers about one thing that we're doing, a second thing that we're doing, maybe a third thing that we're doing in Ava, because I mentioned two already. I mentioned the consensus protocol, it's super fast. And I mentioned the fact that we can run virtual machines. Anybody can run a separate virtual machine. But there's an additional thing we can do in Avalanche on Ava that other coins have not been able to do. And it's this thing that we call subnetworks. So what you can do in Ava, because it's an asset issuance platform, is anybody can create an asset. And in creating an asset, you can define exactly how that asset moves and behaves by defining your own virtual machine. So that I already mentioned, and so that's a good thing to be able to do, to accommodate multiple different virtual machines. We accommodate the entirety of the EVM within Ava. So all of Ethereum is essentially a subset of Ava for us. But there's one additional thing you can do. You can say, look, I'd like to launch my own token with my own VM. In fact, I'm going to reuse the EVM. I'm going to have my own variant of EVM. Or I'm going to use this other VM that knows how to treat real estate. If two coins are adjacent, two parcels are adjacent, you can merge them. If you like, you can divide them, So you can do that. But in addition, you get to say this. You get to say, I would like my nodes. I don't want everybody on Earth to be participating in this. I want my special nodes to be in this network. Now, in fact, I want only purple-colored nodes. Now, what's a purple-colored node? Well, as the asset creator, you get to define who's purple. And in selecting your validators, you can then express the unexpressible things that you could not encode into the code. What can you not encode into the code? Well, there are a bunch of things that we don't know how to express in code easily. For example, resource requirements. To participate in my network, I don't want Raspberry Pis. I want nodes with a lot of RAM. You can say this and do this in our world. Or you can say, to participate in my network, you need to be located in the US. You have to be under US jurisdiction. You have to respect the GDPR for the EU. You have to obey a blacklist. You have to enforce a whitelist. Or you have to have signed a special, one-to-one contract with me to be my validator. In the real estate example, I would like the validators to commit to keeping the records for, let's say, 20 years or so, maybe 50 years. Now, that's expensive. Not everybody should be validating that. And joining the system should be something that takes effort and time and money and a commitment. But that's the commitment that's necessary. And in return, something funny happens when coins, when assets are a first-class entity in your system like they are on Ava. Those validators that are buying in, they know what they're doing. They know they're validating my real estate coin. Okay, they should be in the U.S. jurisdiction, and they should do archival for me. So they can say, okay, I'll do this, but in return, I want, and I know what I'm doing. I'm buying into your purple coin, and in return, I want transaction fees commensurate with the service I provide. This archival is not cheap. It's going to cost maybe not hundreds, it's going to cost tens of dollars. And maybe the transaction fees ought to be in the hundreds to thousands. It's a real estate transaction. You can't just build that on any other coin, but you can on Ava. You can express both the in-network rules through these virtual machines and the externalities by controlling the validator sets. So when I talk to these companies that are all doing permission networks, the one crucial thing they want is the ability to control the network. And that's exactly what Ava gives them. So if you want to issue your own tokens, if a company wants to issue their own tokens, and yet they want to talk to the world at large, to other people, to exchanges that take Ava, exchanges built on Ava, then the right protocol to use is the Avalanche protocol, because these sub-networks of specialized validators are bridged together using the Avalanche protocol. So that puts us in a unique position because we give everybody control over their coins, their tokens, their assets with our faster engine, with our ability to accommodate virtual machines, and our ability to control their subnetworks.
Well, fantastic. That seems like a great place to wrap the whole thing up. Where could people find more about AVALabs?
AVALabs.org. Come to our website. We have a Discord channel. We have a Reddit. We have everything there is to have. There are many Telegram groups in multiple languages. Come join. It's a very small project. We took only one round of funding so far, so we're very early on. And come be part of the fun. We're still coming up with use cases, and we just recently opened up our code base yesterday. So I'm thrilled about that. If you have any input on any front, I'd love to hear it. We're running a bug bounty with up to $50,000 per bug. And the bug bounty is being run in a funny way. We embedded 4 known bugs. So we know that there are 4 great bugs to find in there, and maybe more. So come join the fun. It's a great positive group. We've been informed by all of the things that we saw in first generation coins. And we're sitting on top of an enormous technological breakthrough, the Avalanche protocol. And just come by. We're nice people. We're trying to change the world. And we want to rewrite the way everything is done. I'm looking at FIDI, the financial district of Manhattan, out the window right here. So those folks all should be doing everything differently. Everything should be on the blockchain. They realize it. We realize it. It's just that what the community has offered to them so far has fallen short. And I think Ava has addressed the needs that they have, as well as addressed the needs that everybody has from digital tokens.